John and Ken Show. John Covell and Ken Champeau. KFI AM 640. More stimulating talk radio.
Well, one of our favorite subjects has returned to get some big attention today in Washington, D.C. It's the brown doggle. And we're going to talk to Congressman Jeff Denham. He chairs the Transportation and Infrastructure, are you ready for this, Subcommittee on Railroads, Pipelines, and Hazardous Materials. And they held a hearing today to talk about the federal funding for California's high-speed rail. As you know, a judge pretty much put on hold using the voter-approved state bond funding a couple of months ago. So Denham is actually going to introduce legislation to suspend federal spending on the high-speed rail project. Let's get him on the air and talk more about all of this.
Jeff, welcome to the John and Ken Show.
Gentlemen, thanks for having me again.
We've covered this a lot for years now. This thing, from our perspective, is a complete fraud. What did you get out of questioning some of the principals here, including Dan Richard, who's the CEO of the High Speed Rail Authority?
Well, we certainly talked about both the legality of their actions as it pertains to the court case, but also the constitutionality of using cap-and-trade dollars to try to fill this funding gap. What they're doing right now is breaking the law. They're trying to do anything that they can to spend this money before the federal government is forced to bring it back. What Californians should be concerned about, I mean, not only is this project short-sighted and wasting money, spending money that Californians don't have, but it really puts us on the hook. This is what came out of the hearing today, was that they reaffirmed that if the state can't come up with its 50% match due by law, then the federal government will start holding up all rail funding, will start holding up all highway funding and aviation funding, could hold up education funding that comes from the federal government. So basically all money that goes from the federal government to the state could be held up in the future if the state can't come up with this Prop 1A dollars or any other alternative funding.
Now, will the federal government withhold all that funding? They do have the discretion as to whether to withhold it or not.
Well, this is a multi-year, multi-decade, multi-administration issue. I imagine that there will be some that come in and say, look, this project needs $55 billion. That's more than our entire highway budget, our infrastructure budget across the entire nation. I imagine the other 49 states would have huge issue with allocating all of their money to California. So I think whether it's under this administration, under pressure, or under my bill, or the next administration that gets asked for tens of billions of dollars to fix this project, I would expect that both at some point are going to have to say no.
You know, this is pretty clear on the funding. Dan Richard has no funding for this. The federal funding is limited and could be withdrawn. The state funding is very limited because the judge is blocking the rest of it, and there's no private investment. And he blusters every day about having a plan, but
that's why Jerry Brown stepped in with the cap-and-trade money, which is where Jeff started the conversation. There's legal issues with that, too.
But even that's a small amount of money.
Yeah, and it also came clear under the governor's budget. So they do an annual budget, which obviously this $250 million constitutionally has to be approved by the legislature, which I think is a real question. Even if that money can be used, it'll take until July or August when they actually approve a budget. $180 million is due April 1, so I think that's a big issue in itself. But what the court said was that the entire operational segment must be funded, which means there's a $20 billion hole. So what the governor did was, over his 5-year budget, he basically said next year the federal government will come up with that $20 billion. There's nothing out there that says the federal government has $20 billion or will show up with $20 billion. Even the president is not proposing that the federal government give the state $20 billion. This is pie in the sky.
So what we're talking about is this $180 million. That's what the state has to match for the federal spending by April. And I guess you questioned somebody at your committee hearing today to ask, just how solid is that deadline? Do you really think it's possible federal funding will stop unless the state comes up with $180 million by April?
It is an absolute hard deadline. Under the Anti-Deficiency Act, even after the rail authority changed, the rail administration changed their guidelines, this money, $180 million, is due April 1. So at this point, by executive order, the president would now have to change the rules yet again to let California off the hook, allow California to rack up even more debt, which then puts all of this other funding in jeopardy in the future. I mean,
he could do that, though. He could issue an executive order and give the High-Speed Rail Authority a waiver on coming up with the money.
It would take the Obama administration to change the rules again by executive order.
And is there any word on whether they would do that?
They did not answer that question today. So they are leaving that right now. What they're continuing to say is they have all faith in the governor and the rail authority to come up with that money.
You know, when it was put on the ballot, it was supposed to be $33 billion. Then it went to $100 billion. Then they made up a $68 billion number, except it's not high-speed rail anymore. The ballot initiative says the train has to get from L.A. to San Francisco in 2 hours and 40 minutes, which is impossible. It'll take at least an hour longer than that, if not more, based on their current plan. This whole thing, everything violates the proposition. Everything they're trying to do seems to be illegal.
It does, and I think the voters should have a say in this. This should go back before the voters. They've obviously changed this plan many times, and it's nowhere near what voters narrowly approved in 2008.
Did you get straight answers from Dan Richard?
You know, Dan Richard has actually done a pretty good job of not only showing up when we've called on him, but actually giving us the documentation that we've required. Now, we have a disagreement on funding, but he has at least been straightforward in getting us the information that we've
But there is no funding. He doesn't have. It's not a disagreement. He's not saying he's got any funding. He doesn't have any.
No, but he is planning on spending money until somebody forces him to stop.
We're talking to Congressman Jeff Denham. Jeff, it looks like what they want to do is just get that first segment started, break ground, start to put up the framework for it, and that way they'll have the attitude, well, no stopping this now. Look how far we've gone. That's how we read this. They're anxious to at least get to that moment where they've started to put up something.
No, they've made that very clear. And members of Congress have made that clear that there are other projects that have started and had to sit for decades until more funding was available. That's just not a way to run a railroad, and that's certainly not anything that I'm going to support coming out of this committee. We were promised a bill of goods under Prop 1A, and we're going to hold strong to that criteria.
What is the obsession with this? I mean, there's not a market for this. It's not going to relieve traffic congestion in Los Angeles or San Francisco because this thing runs north-south, through the Central Valley.
Exactly.
There's not much traffic going north and south.
No, they're trying to say it's going to get cars off the road. That this isn't meant to be a metro or a people mover in the local area. This is supposed to, be competitive with airlines. People that are flying from L.A. to San Francisco now would have the opportunity to take a train.
Well, who's going to do that if it's slow speed?
Not very many people. You and I see eye to eye on this.
Yeah, I know, but I mean, it's reality. It's not it's not a partisan thing with me. It's just you're looking at the reality of it. There's no customer base for this.
I think this thing might have been dead, Jeff, if not for Jerry Brown being a big cheerleader and fighting for it.
Yeah, and it may be dead anyways. Some have said, I've had a number of reporters ask me if Jerry Brown is trying to find a way to gracefully get out of this, and certainly using cap-and-trade dollars are so suspect. I think even liberals in the legislature would have a hard time approving that this money's never coming to fruition.
Well, they want that money for all kinds of other environmental projects.
Yeah.
All right, thanks for talking to us. We appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
All right, California Congressman Jeff Denham.
They had a hearing in
from
Washington, D.C., led by California Congressman Jeff Denham. There's no money. There's no high-speed rail. But these fanatics keep fighting. And they keep claiming that they're going to get money. But after all these years, this thing passed in 2008. It's now 2014. It's over 5 years later. They don't have a single dime from private investors, and they have gone around the world.
And the last-ditch effort by the leader of the Brown Doggle, Jerry Brown, is to try to take this dopey cap-and-trade money, an unfair tax on businesses over global warming emissions, and throw it at the high-speed rail to maybe make everybody back off, but I don't think that's going to work. Here is Dan Richard before this subcommittee chaired by Congressman Jeff Denham, who, yes, is going to introduce a bill in Washington to stop federal funding of the Brown Doggle. Dan Richard talks about what John was just mentioning, these mysterious private investors who might want to jump in on the brown doggle.
In Europe and those places where you travel on trains, they're true high-speed trains. I know there's been some commentary on that, but that is what we're building, a high-speed train that will go more than 200 miles an hour. And be
wait, stop.
Oh, wow, that wasn't even 10 seconds. You're not building a high-speed rail. You're doing this blended thing. That's how you got the price down, we think, to $68 billion.
It's
because it's going to be blended rail systems where most of the trip won't be high speed.
Play that again, Clay.
In Europe and those places where you travel on trains, they're true high-speed trains. I know there's been some commentary on that, but that is what we're building, a high-speed train that will go more than 200 miles an hour and be fully electrified and clean and so forth. Exactly what the people of California and the people of the United States want to see.
Liar.
Not what they
I
voted
know that
for.
this is a controversial
Liar.
project, but if we can find ways to come together and
Stop
really
lying.
talk about this project and what its objectives
Stop
are,
lying.
to the extent that the private sector
Stop
sees
lying.
that there is an ongoing commitment, both from the state of California and the federal government, that will accelerate private sector
looking for
money
suckers.
into this project. We estimate that
Can you stop a second? There's no private money because there is no proof that there's a market for the train, which means whoever buys into the train will suffer operating losses. And by law, they can't use tax money to cover those operating losses. If Ken and I had the John and Ken Train Company and we would take over this project, we would want assurances of profits. They have no market, and they're not allowed to use tax money to subsidize it. And that's why not a single investor, not a single company in the entire world has offered a penny.
I mean, let's take a moment to examine this lunacy, the BS he's selling. And I've heard this before. They think if they can build the first segment, are you ready? Bakersfield to Madera, investors will come running. They want to make it operational. They think it'll make a profit. But besides the fact that how many years is that going to be anyway before they build the first segment and it's operating and it's, quote, making – this is nonsense.
It is.
All right, in this clip, he talks about Jerry Brown's flim-flam plan to use the global warming cap-and-trade money to fund the brown doggle.
Governor Jerry Brown released his new budget for the coming year, and in so doing, he included a proposal to allocate revenues from the state's new cap-and-trade greenhouse gas emission program to the California High-Speed Rail program. We believe this $250 million in the coming fiscal year, if approved, will portend a long-term, sustained effort, which combined with the bond funds and the federal funds can help us build all the way to the gates of Los Angeles within a decade, and that will change things dramatically. I'd like to close with these words from Governor Brown as he described his commitment to the California High-Speed Rail project. And he said, and I quote, "No big project, whether it was the Golden Gate Bridge, Transcontinental Railroad, or the Panama Canal, was free of very strong criticisms, skepticism, and attack.
Yeah, this is the Golden
That
Gate
goes
Bridge
with
and the
territory.
Panama Canal.
This is a big project. It was started by my predecessor," the governor said, "something that I proposed and talked about when I was governor the last time.
Schwarzenegger.
There is no doubt that California will have millions more people coming to live in this state. Many of them will live in Central California.
No, here it is
We
again.
cannot add more freeway miles, particularly when we already saw
They're all going to the desert in Central
331.8
California.
billion vehicle miles traveled last year. We need alternatives. And transit and high-speed rail are part of that mix. And the program that I have set forth," said the governor, "strengthens the local rail, the commuter rail between San Francisco and San Jose, and in the Southern California area. It reduces greenhouse gases.
No! Put a cork in him. Put a cork in him.
A cork. You know, in addition to the craziness about this exciting Bakersfield to Madera first segment, I also heard Dan Richards say, the key is getting to Palmdale.
Really? It always is, isn't it?
He believes they get the high-speed rail down to Palmdale, which is close enough to L.A., they've really reached a milestone. I should laugh. Folks, I want you to listen carefully. We're trying to save you almost $10 billion in your taxpayer money. This is no joke. Now, some of you listening did vote in 2008 for California's brown doggle, the high-speed rail. I won't call it high-speed anymore.
No, it's slow speed. It's from now on, I'm only calling it slow speed because that's what it is.
This may be the biggest favor we've ever done you when it comes to your tax money if we can stop this thing. This is really serious.
Wow. They live in a fantasy world, and everybody's sitting there wearing a suit.
No,
and
you're
they're
right.
all
They're
nodding at each
shoveling
other.
it because they want to keep the gravy train
But
going with the money.
Why doesn't anybody stand up and just say,
Dan Richard would like 20 years in this job.
Nobody ever confronts these people in public. There's never even with this hearing today, there's not really a direct give and take. It's like what's the market? Where are the customers here? How are you going to get a private entity to come in when you can't subsidize it with tax money? Why do you keep talking about traffic in L.A. and San Francisco when this is a north-south route? This is a competitor to airline travel. It's not a competitor to your morning commute. Nobody commutes between Los Angeles and San Francisco. Nobody does that. They take business trips for a day or two, and then they come back, but they don't commute every day. And the plane works really well.
All right, when we come back, the U.S. Marine Corps is trying to determine the authenticity of the